Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with The Mystic Tide by Albert Mackey, Book the First. Part 4, The Tenets of Freemasonry. The Essenes taught that the best temper for man consisted in three affections: love of God, love of truth, and love of man, and that the best employments of man corresponding to these, viz., contemplation and healing the bodies and souls of men. Harriet Martineau's Eastern Life, page 399. At a very early period in the course of his initiation, a candidate for the mysteries of Freemasonry is informed that the great tenets of the order are brotherly love, relief, and truth. These virtues are illustrated and their practice recommended to the aspirant at every step of his progress, and the instruction, though continually varied in its mode, is so constantly repeated as infallibly to impress upon his mind their absolute necessity in the constitution of a good Mason. Brotherly love might very well be supposed to be an ingredient in the organization of a society so peculiarly constituted as that of Freemasonry, but the brotherly love which we inculcate is not a mere abstraction, nor is its character left to any general and careless understanding of the candidate, who might be disposed to give much or little of it to his brethren, according to the peculiar construction of his own mind, or the extent of his own generous or selfish feelings. It is, on the contrary, closely defined, its object plainly denoted, and the very mode and manner of its practice detailed in words and illustrated by symbols so as to give neither cause for error nor apology for indifference. Every Mason is acquainted with the 5 points of fellowship. He knows their symbolic meaning. He can never forget the interesting incidents that accompanied their explanation. And while he has this knowledge and retains this remembrance, he can be at no loss to understand what are his duties and what must be his conduct in relation to the principle of brotherly love, as these 5 points of fellowship compose the very sum and substance of all that Masonry requires from her children in their thoughts, feelings, and actions to each other. A brief recapitulation of these duties will be one of the best defenses of the principles of the institution that could be offered in reply to those who contend that the obligations of a Mason conflict with his duties as a man, a Christian, and a citizen. These 5-fold duties of brotherly love are, then, thus detailed. 1. Cheerfully and liberally to stretch forth the hand of kindness to save a falling brother and to relieve him in the hour of his necessity. 2. To preserve, in despite of weariness or sloth, in the active exercise of this kindness, to hasten with alacrity to the performance of our reasonable service, of charity and love, and to turn not aside in our journey of affection, until we shall have accomplished all that a brother's wants may require. 3. Trusting not to our own unaided efforts, we seek from God forgiveness for the past, strength for the present, and a promise for the future, to remember that our brother also needs the like forgiveness, strength, and promise, and join in our devotions his name with our own. 4. The unflinching fidelity to retain within our own bosoms the secret and confidential communications of a trusting friend, and thus to guard the honor of a brother with scrupulous care. 5. To support and sustain the character of a brother when unjustly reviled, as we would wish him to do to us, in his presence, kindly counseling him of his faults, in his absence, warmly defending his reputation. Such is the practical application of this tenet of brotherly love among the members of the society, not given, of course, in these words, but far more impressively with the aid of symbols in time and place and circumstance, to engrave it deeply and solemnly on the mind, but its teachings are extended still further, and not circumscribed in their influence to the fraternity. We are told in our lectures that we are to regard the whole human species as one family, the high and low, the rich and poor, who, as children of the same parent and inhabitants of the same planet, are to aid, support, and protect each other. The result of such a principle is, as the lectures continue to teach us, that Masonry unites men of every country, sect, and opinion, and conciliates true friendship among those who might otherwise have remained at a perpetual distance. Brother Dunkerley, who was a distinguished Mason in the middle and latter part of the last century, gives his testimony to this happy influence of brotherly love in the following language. By brotherly love, we are to understand that generous principle of the soul which represents the human species as one family, created by an all-wise being and placed on this globe for the mutual assistance of each other. It is the attractive principle or power that draws men together and unites them in bodies politic, families, societies, and the various orders and denominations among men. But as most of these are partial, contracted, or confined to a particular country, religion, or opinion, our order, on the contrary, is calculated to unite mankind as one family, high and low, rich and poor, one with another, to adore the same God and to obey his law. All worthy members of this society are free to visit every lodge in the world, and though he knows not the language of the country, yet, by a silent, universal language of our own, he will gain admittance, and find that true friendship which flows from the brotherly love I am now describing. Author's note: lecture published in 1757 and published in Oliver Golden's Remains, Volume 1, page 144. The brotherly love of Freemasonry is, as an attractive principle of good, diametrically opposed to the asceticism of the monkish orders, where the folly of believing that our Heavenly Father is pleased at the sight of self-inflicted suffering is only surpassed by the sinfulness of burying every talent originally intended for the good of humanity. An anchorite and a Freemason are the antipodes of human character. See on this subject the legend of Aneephrius in the wilderness, quoted at length in an article on Legends in the Dublin University magazine, and which has been copied into Little's Living Age, Volume 36, page 379. The legend, which is well worth reading, teaches the necessity and duty of active brotherly love in opposition to ascetic life. Its closing lines are peculiarly appropriate to the character and design of Masonry. For as many men as grieve and wrong their brethren, even so many more give to each other pity, aid, and strength, and consolation. Man was made for man. Relief constitutes the next tenet of our profession. On this subject, I need not dilate, as an article in a succeeding part of the volume on the Charities of Freemasonry will sufficiently indicate the extent to which we practically carry the doctrine of relieving the distressed. Relief is, indeed, the necessary consequence of the former tenet, for the love of our brother will naturally lead us to alleviate his misfortunes, to compassionate his misery, and to restore peace to his troubled mind. These acts are but the links of that indissoluble chain of sincere affection with which our order professes to bind its members. It was a wholesome rule, says Brother Thomas Douglas, the late estimable past master of Florida, among the ancients of our order, in all cases of severe illness in a brother's family, that a master mason should be present in the house, especially at night, to be always ready to give the necessary aid and assistance that the circumstances might require, and I am happy to find that an increasing attention is now being paid in many quarters to this good old rule. In the solemn hours of affliction and distress, no individual can more appropriately, delicately, and confidentially perform these duties than a warm-hearted, sympathizing brother of the mystic tie, waiting upon and nightly watching the sick brethren of the lodge, and in case of distress, supplying the wants of the family of the sick or distressed brother, were among the ancient practices of the brethren of our order, and should on no account be neglected in these later times. Truth is the last, but the most sublime of the Masonic tenets. Truth was personified by the ancients as a deity and said to be the mother of virtue, while Democritus feigned that she lived at the bottom of a well, to intimate the difficulty with which she was to be found. Truth is still more profoundly symbolized in the science of Freemasonry. Lux e tenebris, light out of darkness, or truth separated from error, is the motto of the order, because it expresses the object of Freemasonry and what the zealous Mason is seeking to attain. Lux, or light, was anciently adopted as one of the names of Freemasonry, because the doctrine of light or truth was regarded as the great object of the institution. Among the ancients, the cube was considered as a symbol of truth, and the cube still continues to be the emblem of a Masonic lodge. This search after truth, which, under the name of Lux or Logos, the light of the world, comprehends in its most important illusion the knowledge of the true God, constitutes the great labor of the Freemason. He demands it in the bright noonday of his refreshment, but his probation does not yet entitle him to its possession. He seeks it in the grave of departed worth, but he is not yet prepared to receive it, and, still dissatisfied with all substitutes for its value, he at length descends into the bowels of the earth in search after this so much desired truth. He is taught, all other things are mortal and transient, but truth alone is unchangeable and everlasting. The benefits received from it are subject to no variations or vicissitudes of time and fortune. A French Masonic writer has thus appositely shown the connection between Masonry and truth. Masonry, both in its essence and its principles, is everywhere one, although it has neither a common center nor a general government, and it is not the least of its phenomena that while it presents a unity of views and conformity of doctrines over the whole earth, neither these views nor these doctrines emanate from one head or from a board of directors. This isolated fact proves that truth forms its basis, for truth alone is unchangeable, and this, more especially, becomes a unity of principles, always elsewhere disappears as soon as a sect or party ceases to be attached to a common center of direction. Such are the tenets of a Mason's profession. Can an institution based on these exalted virtues be deemed worthless or puerile? They are the teachings of a noble doctrine, which, if carried out in their fullest extent, would result in the most beneficial consequences to man. These social institutions and civilities of life would become more engaging. Human frailty would have fewer opportunities of displaying itself. Temptation would be circumscribed within narrow limits, and the world would be governed by brotherly love, relief, and truth, under the guidance of virtue, honor, and mercy. Such a consummation is most devoutly to be wished. That it has not been achieved is no fault of Freemasonry. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.